Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Erik, a teacher with LSAT Demon, and joining me is one of our latest team members and LSAT Demon student, Aaminah, who has crushed the LSAT and has some very exciting law school news to share. Aaminah, welcome and thanks for joining.
Thank you, Erik. Happy to be here and happy to be with the team.
Yeah, so tell me about what you're doing.
Well, so right now I am in the waiting period between my time from taking the LSAT and going to law school. So right now I'm actually, as Erik mentioned, working for LSAT Demon as an Ask Button responder, which I love. But yeah, in the fall I will be going to UCLA Law School.
I'm sure the listeners want to know scholarship.
Yes, scholarship. So actually, this is interesting. So I got a full ride to UCLA, but I got it through a program called the Distinguished Scholars Program. So one of the things that really drew me to UCLA, among many others, but was this program because it is a full ride merit-based scholarship. And yeah, I applied for this November 15th. I want to point out, you guys, deadlines. Deadlines are so important. If I had not researched this, like I actually found this like 2 years ago when I first started applying for or getting interested in applying for law school. If I had not done that, I would have no idea about that deadline and I probably would have missed it. But yeah, applied for that program, did interviews with the dean of admissions and the associate director, and yeah, found out about mid-December that I was accepted, cried my eyes out, and I'm so happy to be attending in the fall.
That's so cool. So tell me a little bit about that particular program. Is there additional like coursework that you're going to be doing or extracurricular stuff that goes along with that?
I don't think so. From what I understand, it's really kind of just a scholarship that, well, bestows honor on you as an incoming 1L class member.
Hmm.
But outside of that, I think it's really just a title and a scholarship. There isn't like a specific like distinguished scholars like cohort within the cohort, from what I understand. So I
Hmm.
don't think there's any particular coursework or anything like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, maybe they'll throw a couple free lunches at you now and again. Uh,
Hey, I'll take it.
can't turn down some free pizza. Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. All right. Well, you mentioned your Ask Button work. I definitely want to get to that. But why don't we backtrack? You said you started this journey 2 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I think 2 years ago. So I started I feel like with many people, I started with a different prep company 2 years ago. And honestly, like I felt like that prep company did a good job in like teaching me the LSAT basics and fundamentals, especially at that time too. It was logic games, which logic games. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness. I know a lot of people like logic games. I was not one of them. I was so happy to see it go.
Oh,
But
you're
in any
breaking my
case,
heart here.
yeah, not a logic games fan. But in any case, I started 2 years ago with that other prep company. They taught me the fundamentals, but I felt like it wasn't really clicking. I went to take the LSAT, even though I felt like I wasn't ready to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like my score that I got back reflected that. Not that it was bad, but it just wasn't what I knew I was capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, honestly, it was demoralizing for me, and it made me kind of just want to like take a whole step back from the application process,
Yeah.
which I did. Um, and then sometime later, this was September of 2023 that I took the LSAT the first time.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Was it just you were impatient or excited to see what would happen, or were you being pressured to take it? Like, what was the decision to take it before you were ready?
So you may recall that I mentioned deadlines, yes,
Yes.
and not having an awareness of deadlines. And part of that meant that when I was taking the LSAT that year, I didn't know why I was doing it. So
Mhm.
I was taking it in September. I had taken this like accelerated course to be like to go from June to September, basically no LSAT prep to take the LSAT by September. But I didn't know why I was doing it in September. Like I was just doing it because that's what everybody else seemed to be doing. So I was like, okay, September LSAT, like let's go. And I was by the time that I finally kind of like understood like why we're doing September LSAT, like how it lines up with the deadlines of early applications and things of that nature, like I just was like going along with things.
Yeah.
I had already signed up and invested the money.
Sure.
Now looking back, if I had the insight that I have now, I probably would have withdrawn from the September LSAT and taken more time. And I ended up taking the year anyway. So it wouldn't
Yeah.
have really hurt me to pause there.
Yeah, and unless you come from a family of lawyers and everybody that you know is going through the process and you have access to all that information, it's pretty opaque. So someone tells you, "Oh, this is the time to take the LSAT." Oh, okay, I get that. Can you give me, if you don't mind sharing, what kind of scores were we talking about? Like, what progress did you make in those first few months?
Yeah, so my diagnostic was a 151. And I know diagnostics are useful in terms of like evaluating where you start and where you end up. But I just felt like when I took the diagnostic, I'm like, okay, well, I don't know anything about this test anyway. So of
Yeah.
course it's like, it's not going to be a spectacular score. Like,
I mean, that's a good diagnostic score, by the way. That's, I think, right around the average score for test takers. So,
okay. I mean, again, I did not have any knowledge of this at the time, but yeah,
sure.
yeah.
You just took
Yes,
the test and it
no
felt
shade
like
to
the
people.
logic games were really weird. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And no shade to people in the 151s, 150s. I just mean to say that like I felt like in terms of like the high scores, like I knew that 151 was like, I don't know anything about this test yet. So of course, like there's potential for growth. And then yeah, so from that 151, I went up to a 162 on the September LSAT.
But
Yeah.
you knew you could score better.
I knew I was like from that 151, I was like, I know that there's a 170 in here. Like, where is she? Come out. I know she's there.
Sure.
But yeah, I really felt like I wasn't ready at that when I took that September LSAT, and
Yeah.
it showed on my test.
Okay. So what happened after September?
Yeah, so after September, it was like, as I said, I was demoralized. I felt like, oh my God, like what am I doing? Like, what is this process that I'm in? What am I doing? What is this test? Like, I thought I had a 170 in me, and now I have a 162. Like, maybe I was wrong. So I just like kind of stepped away from the process and like kind of let it kind of observed the application cycle as it unfolded ahead of me without being a part of it. Um, and then I don't remember when they announced that they were getting rid of logic games, but sometime in that like middle period, I heard that and I was like, God has favored me. Like, where I'm up, like, let's go. Um,
This causes me such deep pain. I love those logic games so much.
well, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So,
Yep.
but in any case, yeah. So I mean, I knew I was gonna apply for the 2025 admission cycle anyway. So hearing that was just like an extra boost. I was like, okay, like I knew it. I knew that there was I knew there was more for me. Like that just wasn't my time. So I came back to study. And when I came back to study, that's when I started with LSAT Demon. I don't remember exactly when that happened, but sometime I think in the summer months, I started studying with LSAT Demon. And yeah, I think I just came in like on a cold diagnostic. Oh gosh, I don't remember the exact numbers of my scores. Forgive me. But I think if I'm recalling correctly, I think the cold diagnostic that I did, sans logic games, I got like a 165 from not
Wow.
having studied anything to
Yep.
like, I'm telling you, logic games was my enemy.
Sure.
Um,
We
so
all have our weak sections. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So coming back to that, I got like a 165, and that's when I started studying with the demon. And like,
And granted, that is, you had done some study in the months prior. You took a break, but you had done LR and RC work the previous year.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, when I stepped away after September, like in that period, I wasn't studying, but I
Mm-hmm.
did have that 3 months with my other prep company that I
Right.
learned everything. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's definitely that those fundamentals like necessary, needed that, helped me build on what I was doing with the demon. But the demon just like the intuitive approach, I cannot advocate enough for. Like it just makes sense because it makes sense. Like it's just common sense and it just made everything click for me. It made everything so much easier. And from there, like I really wasn't like doing anything like super intense in terms of studying. Like I wasn't studying 3, 4 hours a day. Like I never ever understood what it meant to make the LSAT an 8 hour a day job. Like I don't have the focus or concentration for that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who does. Respect to you if you do. I cannot do that. But yeah, I started drilling like here and there. I think I was like drilling a couple times a week and then maybe taking practice tests like every week, every other week in the lead up to the September LSAT of September 2024. And I was doing pretty well on my PTs. Like I was getting 170, 171, 173. So I was like, there it is. I knew it. I knew it was there. Um, but I think getting close to that September LSAT, I mean, I took the September LSAT. I got a 167 on that, and I felt again kind of demoralized because I was like, I know that, like, obviously from my practice test, I know that I can score in the 170s and above. So like, why didn't I see that reflected? But
Mm.
um, I think honestly, like, and a piece of advice is like, I felt so much pressure going into that test because I'm like, everything is writing on this. Like, I have to go to law school in 2025, outside reasons, but I have to go to law school in 2025.
Those
I need,
deadlines popping up again.
yeah, those deadlines always getting me. But I need money. Like, I need money to go to law school. And like, I'm living in this, in my mind, it's like anything below 170 is like nobody's gonna give me any scholarship money. So like
Mm.
this is like the mentality I'm coming into the test with. So there was a lot riding on doing well in that test. And I think like that pressure kind of like affected my performance. Like I know, I think specifically I recall having something I always tell myself not to do. And then like I did it on my actual test, even though even in my practice test, I don't even do this, but changing answers. I I think I was changing answers on my test, and I feel like that really like messed with my score because it's something I've seen mess with my score on practice tests.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think that anxiety really like kind of came through on that test, even though I still did, well.
Hmm.
Um,
It is amazing, though, what the pressure of the moment can do to our decision making when we can go in knowing what we need to do, having all of those, having a clarity of mind in, knowing that we can trust our predictions. We know we're not going to worry about the clock. We are going to dismiss wrong answers really quickly. We can know all of that stuff conceptually, but when you sit down in the chair and the test starts and chemicals start firing in your brain and your prefrontal cortex starts going crazy, that decision making, you just forget your training. And so, yeah, I hear you. It can really mess with your mind.
yeah, and it's funny because again, like LSAT Demon preaches like intuitive test taking, and part of that for me, like how that manifested is that like I know like I just get like a feeling about an answer like
Mm,
like I hate to use the idea of vibes but like I do get like a vibe like I feel like this
totally.
answer is right, I feel like it's wrong, like I just kind of understand it before I can really understand why I know that. So yeah, like changing those answers and questioning that intuition, like even though I have been spending the months before honing that intuition so that I could go into the test and not do that.
Hmm.
Yeah, like you said, it's just like sitting in that test chair. It's like it messes with your mind.
But good news was the September test was not the nail in the coffin that you feared it would be.
Well, yes. Well, yes. Yeah, I did. So I did well on the September test. Still like was hoping for that 170, but like, I felt like I had something that I could take into the application season and like be a relatively competitive candidate with. And something to know about me, like if I sound like I'm being like elitist or pretentious, I apologize. Like I really don't mean it that way, but I come from a highly competitive like environment. So in my mind,
Sure.
it's like like I have these incredibly high standards that really don't exist in the real world that I'm working on dismantling, but they still exist in my mind.
You definitely have not come across as elitist at all. And I think it's important for everybody to realize that we're all to a certain extent competing with ourselves on this test. I mean, we're competing kind of against the test, but also against ourselves, or striving to achieve what we know we are capable of. And we're all on different journeys. So, the struggle that someone scoring in the 140s is going through and their achievement in reaching a 150, that's just as valid and just as meaningful as you seeing a 167 thinking, man, I could have done better. Like, we don't have to play the comparison game where we feel bad or elitist or whatever. It's just what that was your journey, and you knew, hey, I'm striving for what I know my best is. So no, yeah, you don't need to disclaim that at all.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so after that, like I started going into my applications with the 167, and that is what I applied to when I applied to UCLA. That is the score that I had.
Hmm.
Um, but also I kind of wanted to do an experiment. I knew again, like working with the demon, working through the ask button, like, oh, I should mention, like that was kind of a primary form of study for me, like answering student questions.
Mm.
Mostly, yeah, I did a lot of that in the lead up to, I think from July to, I started in July as a volunteer. So from July to September, like I did at least 4 hours of that a week. Um, And yeah, from the September LSAT to the November LSAT, which is the LSAT I decided to conduct my experiment on. I actually did not study, like I did not drill. I did not do any practice tests. The only thing I was doing was answering student questions in terms of like just like staying in the realm of the LSAT.
Hmm.
Um,
Why was that such a good form of study?
why was it a good form of study?
Yeah.
It just like answering student questions, it exposes your own like thinking patterns and the way that you approach questions, and it helps you kind of interrogate why right answers are right and why wrong answers are wrong. So, if you can explain it to somebody else, you understand it for yourself, and it's like super valuable. Teaching in any, I mean, teaching, tutoring, whatever you want to call it, for any subject, you will see the same result. But like for me, for the LSAT, it was like just like it was a very low pressure way to engage with the LSAT without like having to engage with my own
Hmm.
insecurities of like, oh no, I got like 10 questions right in a row and now I'm getting one, two, three, four wrong. Like, how do I get over this? Like it just allowed me to like um go through the questions and not have to like, I don't know how to what that like.
Well, it sounds to me like you were engaging in really deep review and you were reviewing mistakes, but you were free from the mental burden of knowing that they were your mistakes. So you still,
Precisely.
yeah, so you still got to do that all important review. But you saw a bunch of mistakes. I wonder, were there some themes that you noticed or trends in common mistakes that you were like, oh, I see lots of people running into this problem. Now I know to fix that in my own test taking?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things I see students not doing, and it's just like it's literally LSAT 101, but it's because it's so basic and fundamental, like it's really make or break, which is just, did you understand the argument? Like, did
Yeah.
you actually read and understand what the argument is saying? Because I feel like a lot of times students have questions, they're like, oh, well, this answer choice requires us to make this kind of assumption, or this answer choice didn't say this, or the text said that, or whatever. And it's like, no, if you actually like compare, if you have a firm understanding of the argument, even if you don't have a prediction, predictions are so helpful, but even when you don't have a prediction, if you understand the argument, like you can take the answer choices and cross-reference and say, oh, is this actually in the argument or is it not? So a lot of the issue is you just didn't understand the argument and you were trying to go too fast and you got the results of that. So that's like my big tip number one is go slow to go fast. And then my second thing is like, I feel like a lot of prep companies do this thing where they're like, if to borrow something I actually was talking about with another student the other day, they say like, okay, like if the grass is orange, if the LSAT tells you the grass is orange, grass is orange. Okay, yes, that's true, I suppose, but like the LSAT, to use the words of our outgoing vice president, the LSAT didn't fall out of a coconut tree. Like it exists in the context of
Yes.
our world. So the LSAT is not going to tell you that the grass is orange because grass is not orange. Like 1 + 1 is 2 in the world. It's 1 + 1 is 2 in the LSAT. Like, and students like so often I think like get so traumatized by this like rigidness and precision that really exists as a concept but not in reality on the LSAT, that they just like abandon common sense and like don't like feel afraid to just like say things that are just commonly logical or common knowledge. Like
Yeah.
yeah, I feel
I,
like that's a huge, huge, huge thing. Like, so then like I get students who will ask like again and again and again for clarification on a concept that I'm like, you're refusing to accept this because it doesn't fit into what you think the LSAT is and not what the LSAT actually is. Like, please,
mm,
please. And I like in the most respectful way, like, please use your common knowledge and common sense. Like the LSAT does not want to hurt you. I promise.
yeah, for sure. It's not out to hurt you. It's out to challenge you. But it sounds like what you were saying is that the LSAT's far more connected to our real living world. It's not this black box that exists on its own. It is very much grounded in reality. So it's not going to tell you that the grass is orange.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, and I remember like that clicked for me specifically. Like, I think there were two questions. Like, one was about, I think, dementia being connected to diet, and another was about, I think, grapefruit juice having an effect on prescription medication. And
Hmm.
like, again, connected to the real world, I saw this information backed up on social media, and I was like, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. I heard this somewhere else. And I was like, always do your research, go and double check stuff. But I was like, oh, like this stuff that I'm seeing on the LSAT actually has real world factual implications and information.
Mm-hmm.
RC texts are taken from actual text. Like, oh, yeah, the grass isn't orange on the LSAT because it's not orange in real life. Like, yeah.
Totally. You ever follow up on an RC passage? You're like,
No.
you learned about something new and you're like, oh, I got to go Wikipedia this right now.
No,
No,
absolutely
you're not that
not.
nerdy. Okay.
No,
'Cause
not quite there. Yeah, maybe in the future.
neither have I. I've never done that either. Of course not. That would be dumb. Um, did you have any, you mentioned that logic games was the big bad for you. Any particular challenges that come to mind for either LR or RC?
I don't think anything that I haven't mentioned, like again, like for me too, like trying to go fast. And like I think too, like another very common mistake is like getting frustrated and then again to the point of slowing down, but like getting frustrated and then just like choosing things that you don't understand or not taking the time to understand because you feel like pressured by the clock. I think like a lot of my issues is like, oh, I was feeling like, oh, I have to rush. I don't understand this, but like whatever, I don't have time to figure it out. It's like, oh, I actually do have time. And I've never really not had time to figure it out in my experience. Like anytime that I've taken the actual LSAT, like I usually finish with like time left in every section. Like, so it's not like I don't have time. Like I needed to just slow down and like not like let that mental frustration turn into mental exhaustion that ruins the experience of the whole test. So for this one, I was literally like, let me just take the pressure off completely. Like again, like I did say that I was going to go into the application cycle with the 167 and I knew that I could, make something shake with that. But also I was like, I know that there's a higher potential, like I have a better attempt in me. I just know it. Like I just have to find it. So it's like, let me just take all the pressure off. I'm not going to study. Like, I'm not going to, okay, well, I'm not going to do drilling. I'm not going to do practice tests. I'm just going to do this work that I do with the ask button, which I think, Eric, you said it was like a deep review, which I would totally concur with, like deep review without having to confront my own mistakes. So again, taking the pressure all the way off. And yeah, I changed like everything when I took the November LSAT. So like, I mean, the only thing that stayed the same was that I took it on a Friday, which I've always taken mine on a Friday, but like I took it in the afternoon. I'm in LA. That means I had to cross the 405 at
Oh, my
3 o'clock.
condolences.
That was its own mental marathon. Like I got to the test, I was actually tired. I was actually exhausted. And I was like, oh, this was a bad idea. But in any case, took it later in the afternoon. Didn't take any practice tests, didn't do any drilling, just did the work with the students. And the most important thing I feel like I did on that test is I did not change a single answer in any section at all. I went through the sections. When it was done, it was done. And yeah, I walked out of the test and I was like, well, I don't know how that went. Like, fingers crossed, because it could be anything. But yeah, I went and did my application for UCLA, which I, I went in and did my application with UCLA because that had a deadline. I couldn't wait for the score to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I got the score back at the end of November, and that was a 169. And I was like, okay, LSAC, you're playing with me because you and I both know this should be a 170. Like, what is this? No, but yeah, that was a 169. So that was interesting for me because it was like, okay, like really again to that point of like the mental strain. When I took that away and like kind of changed some factors and like really just was like, I'm just honestly like kind of going into like I'm taking a practice test. The results came back better. Yeah. And
Totally.
so yeah, I would say the experiment was successful. I might tweak if I were to take the LSAT again, I might tweak a few things, but definitely like not having that pressure of like, this is everything. Everything is riding on this moment, like was so important and impactful.
And you just felt in that moment like you were less stressed taking that test.
1,000%, because like I knew that my 167, even though I felt like it wasn't my highest potential, like I felt like I can, get into law school with this score.
Totally.
So I don't need whatever happens on the November LSAT. Like I don't need it. Like it's not gonna really be like make or break for me. And that really, I think, allowed me to like come in and approach the test without all that like mental blockage.
Yeah. You mentioned that if you were to take it again, you would redo a couple things. What's the the key thing that you would do differently?
Honestly, like for me, I probably would just like it's nothing like so significant, but I would probably just brush up on a few like question types.
Mm.
Um, just like something that a term that LSAT Demon uses a lot that I like really was like, what does this mean? It's like confused is sufficient for necessary. Like, and
Yeah.
I get inherently what that means, like in just in the fact of like you're making like you're creating a logical fallacy in one way or the other. But like I was like, like every time I would see a student asking about like, oh, what does it mean that you confused sufficient for necessary? I'd be like, uh next question. No, but like I had that was one thing that I did have to go in and like kind of like brush up on like in terms of the way that LSAT Demon speaks about it. um because I really just stuck to like what intuitively makes sense for me, and I
Yep.
don't in my brain use terms sufficient and necessary. Oh, actually, and then there's another thing that I would suggest for test takers, which I forgot to talk about, but I will speak on now. One thing that like one philosophy that I really applied in terms of my test taking was immersion. So kind of like learning a language, which I had the basis of language learning to apply this, and I feel like it worked so phenomenally. Like when I started with that other prep company, I joined the Discord, I connected with other students, like I talked about reading and how reading is fundamental. So like I was constantly like living LSAT. So to the point of like doing LSAT as a job, like no, don't do it as a job, but you can kind of incorporate it as a lifestyle and incorporate it kind of holistically.
Uh-huh.
So like yeah, like the LSAT is kind of always running, like LSAT and logic, especially when you engage with logic and you start to understand logic, you really can't turn it off. Much to the chagrin of people who know you.
Gonna say this sounds like a way to make yourself popular at parties.
Oh yeah, everybody loves it. But like it's there was a constant undercurrent of like logical reasoning happening in my brain from that like time that I started, that was constantly like, even though I wasn't always doing LSAT questions, always drilling like in one format or another, like I was seeing the LSAT in my life, and engaging with it without necessarily like having to be actually doing the LSAT. So I would definitely recommend immersion and kind of like that holistic approach. And again, that's why I recommend reading, because it's a way to like engage with the LSAT without necessarily having to be doing questions or engaging with material that you don't like. Like you can engage with literally any kind of book that you like, and as long as you're thinking about it, bam, like now you're living LSAT.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the author's main point here? Do I have questions for them? How is this actually supporting their main point? Yeah. You
Yeah,
can.
and like even like that terminology is very LSAT, but like if you're engaging actively in reading, like those questions will come up in a way that is natural for you as a reader. So it won't necessarily come up as like, oh, what is the main point? But like, it might be like, why are we talking about this? Or like, why did this character do that? Oh, because the author wants us to understand like this. But like, you're not going to be necessarily thinking in those terms, but you will be thinking around them, and it will naturally like build your skills again when you come to the LSAT. So yeah, immersion.
Okay, I want to shift a little bit, and if you don't mind, tell me about why you want to go to law school.
Why do I want to go to law school? So for me, like my drive to go to law school I wasn't like one of these people who are like, oh, I just wanted to be a lawyer since I was a little kid. Um, but for me, it was more so, and I talked about this in my personal statement, but this concept of like the law as a tool of narrative and a powerful storytelling vehicle. So I had an interest in the law in terms of like how we can shape our world, um, by way of understanding the law and interpreting the law in a way that is, because the law is so interpretive, like we have the power to shape how our systems, our social structures and things of that nature, are formed by interpreting the law one way or the other. And for me, like especially as a Black woman, like I felt like there was a space for me to step in kind of as a liaison for communities that don't have access to the law or don't see themselves represented in the law, to be like, I'm here, I understand, and I'm like, I can not only communicate with one end of this relationship, but also with the other, and so I can kind of bridge the gap between two communities that might not be able to touch or might not have as much access to each other, and like help communities that feel like they can't interact with the law in a way that is impactful and important for them. So that was kind of my interest in going to law school. Something that I felt like I really like made a point to do in my applications was honestly to be honest and to be myself and not perform a person that I thought that they would want to come to their school. Like I just really made a commitment to like be authentic and speak to things that were true for me. So like again, as I mentioned, like I didn't like I wasn't like so driven to become a lawyer that it's like there's this like clean track line of like interest in the law in my academic studies and in my career pursuits. So I couldn't speak to that on my personal statements, and I didn't want to try to because there's no story there. But that storytelling thing, that is true for me, and that has manifested in different facets in my life. And that was something that I could genuinely talk about and, genuinely demonstrate my interest in the law in that way.
Aaminah, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a real treat getting to know you, and congratulations on that deal with UCLA. Can't wait to hear what's next for you, and to keep working with you at LSAT Demon.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything that we didn't discuss? Any final things that you want to get across to our listeners? Someone who's maybe where you were 2 years ago, just starting off, intimidated by the thought of the LSAT. They don't have to deal with the logic games. So
yeah, lucky you. Or for the people who wanted it, sorry about that.
yeah.
You know, I think again, like it really just boils down to like I there's a kind of a saying at LSAT Demon too, like the LSAT is easy. I wouldn't necessarily say that the LSAT is easy. Like it will challenge you, but it is doable. And you don't have to be like defeated by this big impossible concept of the LSAT. Like the actual LSAT is not the concept of the LSAT that it is in your mind. Like you can approach it, you can take your diagnostic, and it doesn't mean anything about you as a person. It doesn't reflect your intelligence or like, the limit of what you're capable of or what your potential is for going to law school. Like, I mean, of course, these numbers matter. I'm not going to say that they don't, but I think if you let it matter in your mind, like you're going to defeat yourself and you're going to lose in your mind before you can even, win in real life. So like, don't be defeated. It's not like the big bad. Like you can do it. You can take the LSAT and like manage it and put in the work, and you'll see the results of that.
Well, Aaminah, thank you so much again for sharing your story, and best of luck in law school.
Yeah,
Have
thank
fun.
you for having me, and thank you.
Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.